Today we are going to discuss the great Italian virtuoso violinist Niccolo Paganini. His was an unusual life and his influence was far-reaching. He was known as the greatest violinist of his age. He was an incredible virtuoso who developed new techniques. Not only did he incorporate very difficult double stopping, but even triple stopping, and he would play pizzicato with the left hand and play with huge leaps at breakneck speed, things which had never been done before on the violin. So he was a truly groundbreaking virtuoso. But not only was he a virtuoso on the violin, but he himself imparted this concept of virtuosity to composers of other instruments. Indeed, Chopin and Liszt, particularly Liszt, were both influenced by Paganini. Liszt was so inspired at the age of 19 when he heard Paganini that he decided he too wanted to become a virtuoso pianist. And in fact, the level of virtuosity which Liszt attained on the piano had also never been attained before. This was a time of virtuosity. The concert hall was growing in size. The concerto was becoming a key idiom. Music was louder, violins got louder, they had louder strings. It was an opportune time. The piano had also developed mechanically. It allowed for louder sounds. Liszt was able to take the piano into the concert hall, and the volume allowed for large audiences. It was a time of expansion, a time of development. The sentimentality of the late 18th century was giving way to commercialism, to spectacular feats, dazzling feats. But talking of dazzling, Paganini himself didn't come from such a dazzling background. He was born into a poor family in Genoa, which is a small port city in Italy in the late 1700s. And his father was a bit of a tyrant. He forced him to practice the violin non-stop, but it paid off. He went on to become a great violinist. He was the lead violinist, the lead of the orchestra, in fact, in Lucca, and this led to a prolific concerto career. He set off in the 1820s, and he toured for only 6 years. His touring career began in 1828 and ended in 1834. But during this time, he dazzled the stages of Paris, and he developed a great reputation for himself. But there was also a rumor that he was in a pact with the devil. Because of his appearance and his virtuosity, he had a long shock of black hair, and he was thin and gaunt because of various illnesses. And apparently he spent time in prison, and he practiced non-stop. He had an unusual life which was conducive, in fact, to this level of virtuosity. So there was this notion that perhaps he was in a pact with the devil. And as you can hear in the background, his 24 Caprices for solo violin, which he wrote in the early 1800s, really set a new level for violin virtuosity. And in fact, the theme from the 24th Caprice of the 24 Caprices was used by other composers, the likes of Liszt and Brahms. They copied this theme. It was a truly groundbreaking work. When Paganini's 24 Caprices were published in 1820, they were immediately judged to be unplayable. At the time, they weren't really intended for public performance. They were performed privately. However, today they form the standard repertoire of music schools and of competitions. Interestingly, they are not really just a set of exercises. In fact, they are musical works in their own right, the 24 Caprices. And they present a perfect blend, an amalgam of technique and musical content. So in fact, Paganini succeeded in making what would otherwise seem like drab exercises into musically complete works, musically pleasing and sound works. In fact, the 24 Caprices have become the Bible of aspiring violinists. They set the level for virtuosity. Great violinists strive to play the 24 Caprices. To this day, Paganini's technical mastery on the violin remains unequaled. In addition to his 24 Caprices, his variations and concertos remain a standard part of the violin repertoire. As we mentioned, he had an influence on composers of his time such as Chopin and Liszt. And in fact, Liszt's transcendental studies were directly inspired by Paganini's 24 Caprices. But over and above all of this, Paganini deserves credit for extending the frontiers of technique and virtuosity in music in general.